Stories, brought to you by Refuge Ministries Canada. For the next half hour, your hearts will be filled with hope as you hear real-life stories from individuals that have been changed by the power of God. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Refuge Freedom Stories. I'm your host, Johnny T., and today my guest is Jim Barnard. He's a pastor and the founder of Tiller Coaching. He offers coaching to those who are suffering the reality of the expectation gap, where disappointment, dissatisfaction, and distress can cause real damage. Jim is also the author of the book, The Suffering Guy, the story of his wife's rare chronic illness that set in 3 months after their marriage, and how this reality has strengthened their faith and changed their mindset about everything. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Johnny. I appreciate that. That's a great lead-in.
It's great to have you here. Thanks so much. It says a lot about who you are, what your background is, that you're a man of faith. So why don't we start with that? How did you become a man of faith? And I know that you and your wife were both in that mindset when you got married back in 2006, I believe it was.
Yep.
Tell me about your journey of faith. Were you raised in a Christian home, or did you find Christ on your own terms? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, good question. I grew up in a broken home. My folks got divorced officially when I was in 6th grade, but there was just a lot of conflict and chaos in the home before that. And I had come to Christ, one of those sermons that's like, hey, hell's a terrible place. You should avoid it. So choose Jesus. He's the way to heaven,
Yeah.
At about 5th or 6th grade, I had given my life to Christ and under one of those deals. But it wasn't until like a few years later, I did not respond well to my parents' divorce. I really felt like just nasty, weird emotions, and no one was really trying to help me through it. And I frankly just shut down. I became a selective mute, I guess is the term. I didn't talk at any given point unless, someone like made me, or I didn't want to be rude, I would talk when I had to. But eventually, after several years of just living that fashion, kind of hopeless and depressed, I had started going to a youth group, and I met a youth pastor who was quite literally the coolest person I had ever met. I went begrudgingly. I just went to honor my dad because he wanted me to. And I was like, that's fine, I'll go, but I'm not going to participate, But eventually I got to know this youth pastor, and he started to spend a lot of time with me. He really invested himself into me. And I just thought, man, like, this feels so good. I feel like I have value for the first time in a long time. And that summer is when I finally gave my life to Christ for real, not just to have Jesus in the then and there of heaven, but to have Jesus in the here and now. And I'm so thankful for what he did for me because, I was a sad sack of a kid. I was like quiet, mute. I didn't ever talk. And I graduated from high school. And I don't know if you guys do this up in Canada. Senior year superlatives, the best dressed, best hair. You guys do that in the yearbook?
Yeah.
You guys aren't that much different.
No, not really.
But I got voted class clown and most likely to become famous.
There you go.
That really isn't a humble brag. That is the transformation that Christ made in my life. Sad sack of a kid that won't talk to class clown that won't stop talking. And so that's how I met Jesus, and he transformed me. And I was really grateful for the things he was doing. And honestly, I had no idea how he would use all of this childhood trauma, maybe problems, issues in my adulthood. I had no idea how it was going to play out.
But I think that God allowed that in your life to develop that in you so you can offer that to people who need to hear that. And day and age, it's a void of value, if you want to call it that. Everything just has to be so quick and so entertaining and so flashy and so on. But where's the depth in that? There's no depth in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I couldn't agree more with that. We're such an instant gratification type of people. And, I think life was designed as the slow burn. And there's nothing like suffering to, exemplify a slow burn, because that's kind of what my story is all centered around, is being a suffering guy. I guess to take my own segue here, I ended up getting married when I was about 28 years old. And man, I was ready for marriage. I was excited about what that life was going to be. I had pretty high expectations about, how much money we were going to earn, and all these vacations we were going to go on, and the kids we were going to have, and all this great stuff that I had high expectations on. And then 3 months into our marriage, my wife got super sick. It just life fell apart. At first, it seemed like it was just a stomach flu because she couldn't keep any food down. She was just puking and puking. But after a week or two, it became obvious that there was a real problem, that there was something more at play. And we quickly found ourselves up at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, this world-renowned clinic that had all the experts and all the best tests. And we were excited to have supposedly the best care, but this was petrifying to us. In fact, I started when Alicia got sick. It was like I just wanted to revert back into that mutated kid. I'm not gonna talk. I'm isolating. I'm just shutting down because all of it was too much for me. But the difference between this time and last time was that I had a church community that knew me and loved me, and they were willing to sit with me. They stood beside me. Actually, they held my arms up when I was weak and weary, and it was just really significant how they loved me, and obviously Alicia as well, through an incredibly tough season. It was not fun. 3 months she was up there. I had burned through all my vacation time with the wedding and the honeymoon. So I had to be really selective about when I could be up there with her. And we had some family members that were willing and more available. So, they would chaperone Alicia and be up there so she didn't have to be alone. I was there for the first 15-minute appointment with the managing doctor. And he just asked all the normal questions like, what's going on with you? What's your family history? Tell me about, your growing up, blah, blah, blah. And then Alicia did dozens of the world's most humiliating, terrible, just frightening tests that you could ever imagine. She did all this terrible stuff. I mean, honestly, humiliating. And at the end of the 3 months, we, had another 15-minute appointment with that managing doctor. And so I came up for that, and he walked in and he didn't waste any time. He walked in and said, well, Alicia, here's the deal. I think you're a ruminator. And I'm typically not the smartest person in the room. So it took me a little bit longer to figure out what was going on. Alicia jumped right on it. She's like, I'm sorry. You think I'm a ruminator? Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm nuts? And the doctor's like, no, not nuts, not crazy. I just think there's some emotional things in your past that you haven't dealt with. And, if you got counseling, all this physical stuff would go away. And I'm sitting there like, hold on, wait, what are we talking about? This makes no sense to me. So I'm sitting on my hands. Alicia's fighting and advocating for herself, which is great. She really didn't need me, but I wish I would have been able to speak up because my wife is the most emotionally and mentally sound person I've ever met. She's the real deal in so many ways. And this guy's making this weird judgment and I have no idea why. And so, Alicia's asking all these questions and finally he reveals, well, you revealed that there was some abuse in your past, in your childhood. And, I've just seen this a lot with children, especially girls of abusive parents that, you're going to have illnesses like this. So we just need to address that and you'll be better. And once again, Alicia's done a ton of counseling. I knew all about her childhood and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense. She's amazing. So Alicia's like, well, what about the biofeedback? What about the sweat test? What about all these awful things you did to me? How did they turn out? And he's looking at the charts and the results for the first time right there in this room. Oh yeah, that is pretty interesting, huh? How about that? And it's he just made his decision based on this first 15-minute interview and then had her go through all this garbage. So he's like, I'm sorry, I'm out of time. 15 minutes are up. If you need a referral to a counselor, let my office know. And we were gone. And it was very dejecting on our drive home. But when we got home, we had been referred to Mayo by a GI doctor in our area. So we had to go meet him because he was really curious about what happened. And this doctor, started looking through all these test results and notes and whatnot right there in the room as we're sitting with him. And man, I'm not the puker in the family. Alicia is. If anyone's going to throw up, it's her. But I'm sitting in this meeting about ready to throw up because I'm so pensive. Because I'm like, is this guy going to affirm what the Mayo expert said? That you're a ruminator? And, part of me actually kind of hoped that she would be a ruminator. That seemed easier than what I was imagining was happening, what was wrong with her body. And eventually he looks up from all of this paperwork and he looks directly at Alicia's eyes and is like, honey, it's not in your head. It's in your gut. And I'm so sorry that this man treated you like this, but it was worth it. You going up there. I have all the results I need. It would have taken me years to get all this stuff. This is the best information we could have ever hoped for. And we're going to start making decisions. And so long story short, Johnny, she's got a connective tissue disorder. It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. If you've ever seen a contortionist, someone who can bend their joints in any direction, they've got that same disease. They just have what we call the cool version because they've got, hyperflexibility in their joints and they can go to parties and be like, hey, look what I can do. This is crazy, right?
Yeah.
But Alicia's version is generalized in her abdomen. So just everything in her core is loosey-goosey. There's no muscle tone pushing food through her digestive system. So that's why she was puking so much. She would eat something, it would go down, and then it would get clogged up. It would stay there sometimes for days, for weeks. And then anything else she would eat, there would just be no room in the end. So she would just puke and puke, right? And then also all of her core organs prolapse. They fell out of place and are all now kept in place by cow tissue and meshing and tacks. Like, this is real. This is unbelievable. It was very scary, but this kind GI doctor put us on a path to try to figure it out and treat the symptoms as good as possible. But the reality is there's nothing that can cure this disease. Alicia's just going to be sick for the duration of her life. We've been married for 16 years and she's pretty much gone straight downhill ever since, getting sick. And I mean, she's maybe 70 pounds, on a good day. She's skin and bones, man. There's not much to her. She's incredibly fragile. I guess now's a good time to finally answer the question I think you were asking. Over the last 16 years, it has been awful. It has been absolutely miserable and trying on every single level. But we have tried our best to pay attention to the things that God is doing or has done. And I have seen God work in absolutely absurd ways. Absolutely absurd ways. And we've got a miracle baby. We've got a son, and it makes no sense. Literally is a miracle. It's probably the greatest story I share in the book. He's now 12, which is crazy to me. I knew Jesus and I loved him, but now that, we've been walking this path of suffering, I actually need him. You know what I'm saying? Before I wanted him, but now I need him. And I think that distinctive makes a huge difference. I also think that it's really hard to understand what hope is until you experience suffering. The same way that, the sun goes away every single day, and that's when we have night. We wouldn't probably have a word for daytime if there wasn't night. In the same way, I don't know that we would know what hope is if we didn't have suffering. To that level, I'm really grateful that we've experienced all this suffering. It's not the story I would have written in my life, but it's a story that God wrote, and I can trust him with it. And if I pay attention, I can see the absurd things that he's doing, and I'm really grateful. I don't think I'd be a pastor if it wasn't for all this. I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for all this. And it's a privilege to be able to serve people with my story.
There's some things that came to mind when you were talking about that. I will correct you on one thing that you said that there's no way that she'll be healed, right? In this world, maybe not, but we know that our God is a healer. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I know you've heard that phrase over and over again, I'm sure, over the years as your wife. But one of the things I was thinking about before we started our interview was the story of Lazarus. And I'm a firm believer in what Jesus said. He said that this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And just what you're talking about shows me that God has revealed a side of his character of hope and love and faith through this suffering that both of you can use to reach other people who are going through really dark times. And we all know about the story of Job. And today I was reading in Psalm 73, and I just pulled it up here. It says, "Have I been foolish to play by the rules and keep my life pure? Here I am suffering under your discipline day after day. I feel like I'm being punished all day long. If I had given in to my pain and spoken of what I was really feeling, it would have sounded like unfaithfulness to the next generation. When I tried to understand it all, I just couldn't. It was too puzzling, too much of a riddle to me."
Yeah.
And then at the end, he goes on and he finishes up and he says, "I'll keep coming closer and closer to you, Lord Yahweh, for your name is good to me. I'll keep telling the world of your awesome works, my faithful and glorious God."
Yeah.
And there's just so much around us that needs to hear that no matter what people are facing, God is still there, whether it's physical need, whether it's a spiritual need, whether it's an emotional need, whether it's financial, it doesn't matter what it is. God is. One of the things that has consumed me this year is that God is. He is. It doesn't matter what the situation is you're facing. He is, right?
Yeah.
Final, period. It's done. He is. So no matter what you're going through, He is. And so when I'm praying, I'm saying, God, like, here's all these things I'm praying about. But God, you are. You can do whatever you want. You are. Let your plan let your plan come. Let your glory flow. Let your purpose be revealed, right? And I can see that in your story.
Yeah. Johnny, I'm glad you challenged me on that. I still stay firm on what I said, but the heart behind it is, I think, really important. Thinking of all those set of scriptures that you brought up, John 9 talks about, Jesus walking with his disciples and them coming across a blind man. And the disciples are like, hey, Jesus, we've been wondering like so long, whose sin caused this? Was it his sin or was it his parents' sin? Like finally we get to know, and you can just almost hear the disdain in Jesus's voice. Like, oh guys, come on. Yeah. It's not because of his sin or his parents' sin. It's so that the power of God can be on display through him. Exactly. And then Jesus decides to heal him. And, this young man runs into the city and tells his story. It's pretty simple. Once I was blind, but now I can see. He just repeats that over and over again. I love that so much. Like, I'm not going to lie, Johnny. I want Alicia to be healed. But I'm not sure that that's the best way that the power of God can be on display. I don't have any evidence for it. I have to trust him that the power of God is on display more through us being stuck in suffering. I say stuck, I mean like in an earthly sense, but we live here just temporarily, man. I'm already thinking about the next one. I'm not like trying to speed through it, but like my wife will be healed, probably not here, but in heaven, and the power of God is going to be on display through her. Like us being able to share our story on different podcasts, through my ministry, my coaching ministry, through my book, The Suffering Guy. The power of God is on display, and it's helping people, I think. And I'm really grateful for it. Like I say this quite frequently to people I coach, like this makes no sense. We've had hundreds of nights in the hospital, dozens of surgeries. She's essentially died on me twice. Like I've held her lifeless body in my arms. And all of that stuff is too much for me. Like I literally hate it with every fiber of my being. But I can truly say to you with like full earnesty that I'm really grateful for it. Like God has used our pain to give us a platform to share a story that God's written. And I wouldn't trade anything for it. Like I do want Alicia to be healed. And she's like the most amazing dynamic woman. And it's hard having her be so, confined, at home on the couch. Like she can't drive, she can't work, she doesn't have a ton of energy to be able to do a lot of things.
But her voice and her story carry much further than she could physically take it herself.
She's amazing. Like she really is an inspiration to so many people, even though she's just stuck in sickness. It's not what either of us want, but it's also an invitation to not take ourselves too seriously. It sucks for us, but it's not about us.
No, that's right. And I think that we have to remember that we are basically representations of Christ in this world. As flawed as we may be, and as struggling as we may be at times, his gifts and calling are without repentance, right? He's called you to this place and this time to tell that story about God's faithfulness and God's love. And I can guess without a shadow of a doubt that there are times when God has revealed his heart to the two of you in a way that many of us will never experience in our lives, because of your faithfulness to him. As you said, like this life is so short. People need to understand that, and every day that we breathe and he allows us to live here on this life, he's as close as us asking us to be there. And we just need to reach out in faith.
Absolutely, man. I like what you're saying, man. We're on the same page. So that's good.
Yeah. So it's funny because, God can answer us in ways that we don't even really expect or see. And I'll tell you, there's times when it floors me, and it's such a blessing, but I can see God's love in you guys too. Like it's there. And I want to encourage you, like, don't ever give up that fight.
Absolutely. Man, it is my life's calling now to share our story and to help people that are walking similar paths. So my coaching ministry is called Tiller Coaching, and I give away my time as a freelance pastor. Like I worked in the church for 10 years and that was awesome, but I'm called to this where I give away my time, and it's very similar to counseling, but more intimate. It's like, I get to be authentic and they get to be authentic. I get to coach them through what I call their expectation gaps. So we all have hopes and expectations for career, for marriage, for any part of life. And often reality comes in underneath that. And this gap is really hard for us. It's incredibly challenging. It's full of disappointment and dissatisfaction and distress. And those are things we shouldn't walk alone in. Like, this is all fancy lingo for suffering, but I just coach people through their suffering. Like, this is not the thing I wanted to do with my life initially, but it's everything I want to do with my life now. Like, I'm an expectation gap expert. Doesn't that sound awesome?
Yes, it does.
I'm going to put that on a business card.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. It's just such a blessing that people for many, many years have heard that Christianity is all, sunshine and roses and no issues and everybody's happy, big plastic smiles and stuff. And I think God's just tired of that. And he's just saying, you know what? My people will suffer. You can read the Old Testament. My people suffer. He said, but I'm there for them. No matter what it is they're going through, I'm there for them. And, we just need to take that little step, and he's that close.
Yeah, he absolutely is, man. And this is what I'm saying. It's absurdity what I've seen God do just by paying attention a little bit, slowing down some and looking for him. Like, he really has shown up. And, this podcast obviously isn't long enough for me to share all those stories, but that's why I wanted to do this book.
Okay, so tell me where people can find out about your freelance ministry and where they can get your book.
Awesome. So tillercoaching.org is the coaching ministry. And honestly, you can connect to the book through that website. You can book appointments with me, like literally just book something. There's no charge. Like, I honestly mean that. I raise my own funds to be able to give away my time like a missionary would. Just my mission field is suffering people. So if there's anyone out there that's, feeling the weight of an expectation gap, I would love to help. I only coach men or couples because I'm not trying to coach women. It's just a little bit too intimate for that. Yeah. And then the book is The Suffering Guy, and there's links to that. I've got a little Bible podcast that I've done a few seasons of, and all that can be seen through tillercoaching.org.
Okay. Now I'll leave you with one last question. If you're going to tell people one thing about God, what would it be?
God is present. I think it's easy to feel like forgotten or forsaken by God, but he's here. Like, I really think the narrative of Elijah going out to hear God, and there was the wind and there was the earthquake and there was the fire, but God was not in any of that. It was the still small voice. It is worth slowing down and finding some silence, cutting out the noise to hear him. I've heard him in so many different ways and different places, and he's changed the trajectory of my life based on these things. So I think that's what I want to encourage people with. So yeah, God is present. Awesome.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you being here, and we'll definitely have to get you back another time.
Man, Johnny, that sounds good, man. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Okay, God bless.
You too.
For anyone who's doubting, your back's against the wall. Prayed 1,000 prayers, you don't think he's heard it all. The pressure's unrelenting, time is running out on you. There's good news, there's good news. For anyone who's hurting, wants to run and hide questions and regrets eat you up inside. You tried to escape it, but it's a mess you can't undo. There's good news, there's good news. Even through shadow, even there you never walk alone. You've never been forsaken or forgotten. He'll never stop loving you. Even when it's darkest, that's good news. For anyone who's praying, a miracle will come. walking against hope. God is not yet done. Just stand again, believer. If you're breathing, he's not through. There's good news. Oh, there's good news. Even through the valley of the shadow, even there you never walk alone. You've never been forsaken or forgotten. He'll never stop loving you. Even when it's darkest, keep on walking through the wilderness. Keep believing through the pain. If you fall 1,000 times, just get back up again. 'Cause there's good news. There's still good news. Even through the valley of the shadow, even there you never walk alone. You've never been forsaken or forgotten. He'll never stop loving you. Even when it's darkest, that's good news. Even when it's darkest, that's good news.
I hope that you have enjoyed the last half hour as much as I did. Thank you again to Refuge Ministries Canada for hosting the show. So until next Friday, may God richly bless you with peace, love, and happiness.
We at Refuge Ministries are so blessed by the success of Refuge Freedom Stories and podcasts. In addition, we focus on youth prison ministry, release kits, and many other diverse outreaches to the needs of our community. As a nonprofit, there are many costs involved, however, and we are asking for your support. Financial gifts can be made via our website at www.refugeministriescanada.com or by calling 519-701-0108. Your giving makes this work possible, and we thank you in advance for your support. That's 519-701-0108. God bless you.